Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another Battle Spirit Saga video. And today we're finally going to talk about the top 16 archetype breakdown from the Win It case in Italy that got 66 players for the event. And I got to just stop right there and say nothing but love for the Italian community, because that is an insane amount and the largest unofficial Battle Spirit Saga community event that we have seen so far, right? Like, so no support from Bondi, just an event. Came together, enjoyed, celebrated the game, and had a wonderful time with it. And again, huge shout out to the Nexus guys who did the coverage of it, and obviously on the Italian stream counterparts who were there and hosting and whatnot. It was an amazing, amazing event. And honestly, some of the best games we got to watch of BSS04, all things considered. Now, that out of the way, of course, we're just going to talk about the archetypes and just where they placed overall from a, what won, and then going from each one. So if you want to see the full list, they are up on Eggman's website for more inspiration. But a couple like just top of mind things to talk about first is, one, Fable Beast is back, which is pretty cool. Surprised that Bless is just still really good when you want to be in a tall format, and because of things like Godslaying and Lightning Arrow being just a lot better for how the format is right now, I'm not surprised to see Fable Beast take itself into a top 16 finish. There's actually two different decks. One just missed top 16 on Breakers, but I think this is a case of yellow is in a very fine tier 2 spot. And I think, again, right now is the first time that we've seen where every single color in Battle Spirits does have a spot in the meta. Now, that said, I think the by far the biggest thing that stood out to me from this, and of course we don't have the full field worth of data, but just based on what got into top 16, is that nobody played purple after it just did so well in all the other events we've previously recorded and talked about on the channel. So, what happened? Did people just not want to play purple? Is it something that they didn't feel was as strong based on what they were currently testing into? Because as we know and as we've seen, the purple deck will absolutely stop Hydra, as well as, what ended up winning green aggro before we get into that, or the aggressive strategies. So to see the lack of things like white aggro or purple, I am not at all surprised to see Hydra take as much of the pie as it is, right? When you just get to run a free event and not have to worry about those matchups, then sure, Hydra is going to be very good and do very well for the tournament. So I know at first glance that this does look shocking, but when you think about the bigger picture overall and kind of what the field contained, as well as maybe some people just being newer to the game because this was more of a local event than a regional, I'm not all that surprised, all things considered, with the results and how it shook out. Definitely purple is missing, white aggro is missing. We did get to see green aggro, which does take one of those top spots, but I think as I tweeted about it or showed another case, but we do have a very solid 6 or 7 decks, or I guess now 7 or 8, depending on how you want to look at it with adding yellow, that do have a viable shot at making top 8. And then once you're in top 8, if you just get the good brackets, chances are you're going to win. We've seen this happen season after season in the other regionals and stuff that happened in year 1, so not surprised to see it here happen again. So again, huge shout out to all the players again who came out and battled and challenged this event, but let's get right into it. And I'm sure I'm going to butcher some of these names, so I apologize. I'm just going to say champion in top 4, other than Ismael, who got the green aggro. Always got to give a shout out to the champion, but these games were super intense, super fun to watch, and I know at a high level people are just going to be like, oh, it's green aggro. You just play the tap down stuff. You swing for game, kind of like how white aggro is just bounce the stuff, swing for game, right? But green aggro is, at least a couple turns slower at times, and it does require you to plan out those turns a lot more. And because you have so much of these new Swift spirits coming in with BSS04 and lining up very well, as well as some of the freer ones, you line up turns where it's like, okay, my damage extension is going to be playing these Swift guys, but to do that, I still need to make sure I play like the early Rant Man. Emerald Pincer can help us get in a chip of damage 2 or more, and then, sure, sometimes the Ant Strike backs, they kill something, you untap, oh, here's 5 attackers, go crazy, right? But a lot of times you do have to be a little bit more mindful of how you're lining up your plays, because that one Thorn Prison you have, if they have a removal or something for it, chances are that's all you're gonna get, because those blocks still have to happen, where in white aggro, you just bounce it, and sure, they replay it the next turn, but then it forces them to only have the removal, and then your spirits are still swinging uncontested, because you don't have to get those early sacrifices like you do sometimes with green to push the damage to lead up to those Gale units. Now, that said, things like the Aldeed is something that we've seen a lot of in the more mid-range green list, right? Our 5-drop Prey Bird. It's obviously very good right now in the Prey Bird list, but, tapping something down, ramping a core, kind of does everything that you want it to do. And also sequencing is really important here because with our Swift Spirits, they do need to be paid out of the reserve. So things like Aldeed and Worker Ant-Man are really important to how you sequence them to make sure you have cores left in the reserve. So these matches were super fun to watch. I really had a blast. I want to give a huge shout again to Green Aggro taking down the event. And I think at a high level that also lends itself to kind of talk about the bigger picture, right? We've seen White Aggro do very well. I'm sure Green Aggro would do very well again. And what does that leave? Red Aggro, especially with something with Coalmane where you're able to refill your hand after you put them all out on the board, and Hydra might be picking away at your board, but then you say, hey, I'm going to draw 3 anyways, turn more guys sideways, right? So I think from a overall, meta archetype standpoint, we do have a very good balance of aggro or more aggressive strategies that are viable in multiple colors. And then, of course, we do have our things that are more combo focused, like Hydra, if you can get it early and combo it out, as well as the more control or mid-range pieces with things like some of the purple builds or some of the, Frost Tiger builds that we've seen. So from a overall archetype standpoint and meta development, there are archetypes that you can play that fit every single person, although not every color has one of those decks represented, right? Like white is very good at having the white aggro list, the mid-range tempo, or the full control, but something like green or even blue doesn't quite have it as fully fleshed out yet. So either you can play the game based on your favorite color or your favorite archetype and kind of go from there, and the green aggro really coming through and showcasing that very well. Moving on to our next list, we have a Hydra who made it to the finals. And again, some very fun games that we got to see. Now, the one thing that we will note here compared to some of the other lists that we've already covered on the channel was things like Cthulhu Shark and the Volcano getting added, where a lot of the rest of this does feel pretty similar, and then also the Mandala. So for me, when I think about the Hydra list in general, I think a lot of people haven't either tested or because it is a worse version of it, right? You either can build for the, I'm going to go all in, try to get the pollen, be as fast as possible, get the Hydra set up and close the game, or you can do a little bit slower, try to go for the mill out plan. And I think that's where they were at with being able to put in the Mandala. And I do know that on some level, especially in the purple or white matchups, it can be really important to get that little bit of extra mill that you really need because you're going to have all these nexuses anyways. But I think from a larger standpoint of in the consistency of how many games am I winning off of Hydra versus getting the mill plan to be more relevant, I think a lot of the times you'll find that Hydra is just going to close the game anyways. Now that said, I do absolutely 100% strongly believe that Mandalas should be in your sideboard because again, if you're going against purple or white, sometimes just windmill slamming 2 of them is all you're going to need to close out the game. But otherwise, I think staying on focus with the main Hydra plan is going to be good enough to close a lot of the games. Other than that, things like Deadly Balance, we know how good this card is in the format in general right now. It's never been stronger, and especially with Double Deadly, if you go against purple, it can just feel extremely, extremely oppressive what purple can pull off of right now because of so many sacrifice effects. But at the same time, because we have the spirit level where it's at, purple finally fills that role of being the greater check that if you try to overextend and go into that one big spirit payoff that you want to be doing, Deadly Balance is going to check you very, very fast. Other than that, I got to give kind of the slops to Pollen, right, for whiffing a lot of times that we saw on stream or just overall just low rolling, which, hey, sometimes that's just where it's at, right? So obviously still a very strong card, one you're definitely going to want to play a 4 of in the list at all times. That is never going away, but sometimes it just whiffs and you feel terrible. But then other times you get like double Beldegor in the trash and you're feeling like $1 million, right? So overall, I think this is a few cards off from where we would see a Hydra list kind of end up for a overall meta standpoint. But again, as I covered way back, and you'll see that my original list was not that far off, there's like a shell that you put together with Hydra, and then there's probably 8 to 10 cards at most, right, that you kind of switch around depending on what you're expecting the meta to be overall. So again, huge shout out to the Hydra here, getting it to second place, and ultimately not all that exciting because we know that Hydra was one of the staples from the other events leading up to this event. So very expected high finish from Hydra, being very good spot in the meta. Going on from there, we have Alberto with Ira in the top 4. And what I really like about this one in particular, we have seen a lot of Ira getting played, be it the mid-range version, be it the Smag version, right? And this one really leaned into just kind of more of the classic red mid-range, which even having the grays here and the one of Vaki to really remove the cores and make sure that your Nova can get through for some damage, but also 3 Novas here. So one of the things, it's interesting to see how people can go from the Dustworm, right, get your free big drop in that way to ascend into Ira, versus, hey, we're just going to play the normal game and play the normal Nova package. But Ira, of course, still being a absolute monster at clearing the board when you need it to and drawing you a lot of extra cards. Now, that said, huge shout out to the flex here with the 3 Sagas on both ends. Those are always gorgeous to see. But then again, we will note that Deadly Balance is here once again because it is just a very strong card at what it wants to be doing and how it lines up in the meta overall, right? Deadly Balance has never been stronger in Battle Spirit Saga than it is right now, and that is a set 1 card coming back for us. So very excited to see that how much the meta has shifted just from set 3 to set 4, that I expect to see more of that shift towards the Evangelion set when it fully drops. So not surprising, the 4 Andromeda, right? We do have the 2 Burning Force here. So lots of Nexus removal, trying to stabilize with getting those red symbol reductions on board with the 4 Andromeda, which can help making your Novas pay off a little bit easier. And then, of course, we also do have the Horn General Warrior here, which prevents your guys from getting bounced once they are exhausted. So this one's really interesting because technically if they had the full combo of, you know, Warrior plus Ira plus the Elder Dragon's Jaw or whatever the Nexus is called again, right? You technically have a board lock where that if they are at, 2 life, you're just going to swing, restand, swing, restand, swing, restand. And there's no way out for them unless they have like multiple Deadly Balances or other ways to answer the Warrior, right? So I also like the idea that Red does have a little bit more flexibility in their mid-range plan depending on how you want to utilize this card, because you know that everyone right now is really focused on things like Dream Bomb or an Inescapable Avalanche. So when you know so much of the meta is either going to be revolving around Deadly Balance or balancing options like Dream Bomb, right, this card gets a lot more value for when you're trying to establish these more combo plans or make big heavy plays that you don't want to immediately get punished for. So really like this card as just a 2 of in a list. I think a 2 of is fine because you're going to use Volcanic Canyon to kind of dig for it. And then just really good to see how it lines up overall, because sometimes you're just going to have boards that are like Dino Man Warrior. They're both level 3, very big bodies, very hard to deal with. And one of them's going to have Confront that then can't get bounced. So then you can't also build up your board against it. So really love this card as more of a, I was hoping that it would be like, oh, this is finally the revival of like Pterosaurs coming back. And it's actually been pretty good in that list. Like, don't get me wrong, for when you're trying to get out Gigaon or Rex and you're trying to play things more like Nexus Hazard. But ultimately, I do think it's going to be, for its best spot right now, is more of just a protection against how the meta has developed. Now, of course, we will see down here at the bottom, we do also have the 3 Feral Slash. So again, just talking more about that Nexus removal and how important it is right now. And then some other tech choices, which have been making some very common, sideboard slots in the meta so far. That said, overall having the 5 Magics and 4 Spirits who are good at removing Nexus, there's a very clear note here to say, hey, I really want to destroy Nexus cards, which is a very red thing to be doing. Moving on to top 8, we have Smag. Of course, my boy, I love this guy so much, and I love this list. And finally, as someone who's gotten a chance to test it more, I'm still not sure on what my correct ramp numbers are going to be. But finally seeing the power of Dustworm, and then Dustworm itself just lending itself very well to go into Ira, yeah, I totally get it now. So, part of me does at times miss getting all the extra cores, because, like, if multiple elephants are dying, you're stuck with a bunch of cards in hand, and somehow you don't have enough cores. And that can feel a little bit bad at times, but because of the power level that you're getting out of the Dustworm into Ira combo, as well as being able to sacrifice some of your own guys and get some more draw effects, like, it just feels so much better to play. So I've been playing a similar list. It's been very, very good at just, applying pressure. And what I love about Smag in general is that there are some games where you just go, oops, I got a bunch of ramp guys and I'm going to swarm the board, and then I have like a Dream Bomb for game sort of thing. And then there's other ones where you just slowly accumulate stuff. You get to draw a bunch. You get to resource choke out your opponent because they're going to have a slower start and you don't want to attack just yet until they build up a board and you can punish them for Ira, right? Like we saw in set 3 with Smag. So one of my favorite things that, like, again, I always go back to is that Smag has so many different lines that you can pull off with it, as well as just giving you the most sideboard flexibility, that it just really does feel, for me, like the best deck to play, because you have that core package and then you can do whatever else you want with it, right? a lot of the advantage that these Smag decks have is that your opponent never really knows what's going to be in your list until it's too late a lot of times. Now, because it is a best of 3 game, they can come back from that in, game 2 and game 3. But sometimes that surprise factor does just give you a free game. And, hey, who doesn't love a free game every now and again? And then, of course, we do have more elephants. We do see the full 4 here. They just cut 1 to the side. And then some more popular magic, which I already talked about. And then in previous videos, we talked about Counter Sword. Probably just good to mention here as well, right? When someone tries to IRA you, putting it back on top of their deck, when they lose the Ascend value that way, can be really strong. However, you still lose your board. You still have to worry about it on the next turn if they start to rebuild. But hopefully you at least got some value out of it, and you didn't overextend into the IRA play. That's something you have to be very, very mindful of course, in this format. Moving on from there, we have a top 8 Frost Tiger list. And again, so many different variations of this, right? We do see the Callista in this one. We do see the double bounce package. So I think a lot right now is trying to decide, are we going to go more for the mid-range and just have Frost Tiger at the top end? Are we going to go the full control route, right? I think a lot of people are still trying to figure that out. And me personally, I haven't had time to test the One Punch Man of white versions yet. So I'm not sure where that's going to fall. But I think a lot of people just understand the value of getting to reset a Hydra or reset a big threat for a turn, with Hydra being kind of the MVP. And Valkyrie Mist just being a cheap bounce that gives you another reduction on board and can apply damage. Like, it's just always a good card to have. But Hydra, I think, definitely making itself the MVP here. And then, of course, huge shout out to CappyBot, which is going to have Armor Blue as well. So, again, can't be selected by Hydra's effect. So you just get to sit there, build up your reduction, and let that guy kind of be your key blocker that you want to be using. Again, with that plus suppression, you're only getting to 7k, or suppression's over here. So a little bit worked on that end to really make it a good blocker, but there are some other things that can lend itself to powering it up, or other cards you can combo with it to help you stabilize a bit better. So this is one of those things that, again, shout out to C in the Discord. They made a more mid-range leading into control, but like lowering the curve, but still finishing off the game with like the Frost Tiger and the heavy control top end, but really just using the Valkyrie Mist and the Hilders to help stabilize in those early turns so they could live long enough to get into those control pieces. We've seen the strategy now pay itself very, very well multiple times, and I think we'll continue to see it, but I do hope that someone does kind of crack the code on the more, I forget, I just remember Eric is the card's name, but like Eric, One Punch Man, right? Just the bounce house white that we've seen from the previews that hasn't really shown in itself in the spotlight yet, but could get there very soon. And then, of course, here, just a smattering of 1s and 2-ofs for other white control pieces that we've seen, but again, really great at stabilizing, making sure you're getting to things like your Frost Tiger and trying to close out the game that way, because Elephant itself, again, refreshing, being very, very strong once it wants to be doing 10k power. It just does so much for you. And then getting here to the top 16, we do have the shout out to Fable Beast. And this one, I played a similar version of this. Like, I didn't play the Eat Me Cakes. I played only 2 of the new Genbu. So like I changed around some numbers, and at least just from like my initial testing. Oh, and I also didn't play this 2-drop. I just played an extra Carbuncle, and I played an extra Thorn Prison, I think. Something like that. I changed up a few of them. But anyways, I gotta say that the bigger Genbu is just still funny, because Genbu can make baby Genbu, or old Genbu makes new Genbu unblockable, which double strike unblockable is still very good. But this, like the rest of the text on this card has just been so underwhelming. At least it's just how it's been so far. Now, of course, if you run the Eat Me Cake, it's really cool that you get even more draw effects in yellow, which sometimes if you're in a red heavy meta and you like they blow up all your nexuses, but you're able to stick the Eat Me Cake and draw 2 cards that way, I think that can help out a lot. So maybe if you're expecting a lot of red or a lot of board control in general, you still rely on this combo. But I found once again that it turns out Hippocampo, Dual Ego, and then especially Lightning Arrow with the new Hundun card is just good enough at applying pressure that you're able to heal a bunch. So if people are playing like Hydra or Double Symbol Spirits, you're just like, okay, hit me twice. There's one game I healed up to 8, and they like double hit me with they were playing like the 6 cost Ascend, and I'm like, cool, you ramped me 4, and I feel like I can just bless up again. And then they try to set up blockers. I had another Lightning Arrow, cracked back, gained all that life again, and they're just like, yep, all right, I guess I'm dead here, because Hundun is just absolutely insane. So, maybe not exciting when you think about the overall Fable Beast package and kind of like, oh, what's really changed? It's still Hippocampo, Dual Eagle, and your Nexuses, right? And then Genbu. I get it. But it turns out that's still pretty close to being good enough a lot of times. In Hundun, because that effect works on attack and block, and you're able to sneak in that extra blessed value, I mean, this card is just insane. And then, of course, when destroyed, helping you find more Fable Beasts is always a welcome thing, but generally the 2 for 4 in making your opponent have very difficult attacks and blocks when you're then able to combo it with Lightning Arrow is absolutely insane. So I do think in general, you know, and maybe it's just 4 Genbu with like 1 more of the Joker just for unblockable damage, or maybe you just go to 4 Lightning Arrow and that's just enough, right? But I think we are very close to seeing just like a full blessed unblockable that finds itself very well into the meta because you're able to overheal a lot of the pressure your opponent is sending at you. And of course, that's also still ramping you up while having your good engines, right? We're at a point where Nexus removal is arguably at an all-time low. So now you're even more likely to keep your Nexuses on board, which is exactly where yellow needs to be to thrive. So overall, I do think that with a couple tweaks to this, we could see yellow making more appearance in some future events. But again, at least for me, I'm not completely sold yet on the new combo of Eat Me Cake and Genbu, but drawing the extra cards is always welcome because that is what yellow wants to be doing. Other than that, you know, something that's worth mentioning is that with its when summon, you're only able to select the spirit once and shrink it by 3k. So as I was playing this, a lot of times, other than like clearing the way for this Genbu itself, if I didn't already have the 8-cost Genbu, this was just like a, oh, if you have some tokens, like I'll kill those, right? Or, oh, you forgot to core up something, I can kill that. Like, it didn't really feel that impactful because my spirits already had ways to be unblockable, either with Dual Eagle, with Hundun, with Genbu, with Lightning Arrow, or I wanted my opponent to block so I could use a God Slaying to then, you know, free it up on the next turn. So I think like from an overall, how do the board states line up to apply pressure in a way that yellow wants to be applying pressure? The new Genbu doesn't really do it. But again, getting yourself in a position where, especially against yellow, they're more likely to stabilize at 2 life, knowing that unblockable Genbu is how you're going to win the game, that they might just fall prey to, you know, getting stuck at 2, then you make the 7-drop Genbu unblockable and kill them that way, right? So I think overall, again, this is something that once I play tested it and I saw really the new Hundun and the new Lightning Arrow really come together as kind of a package deal, I am way more excited to play a lot more yellow in the near future, and I think it's definitely something that you should keep on your radar if you liked Fable Beast in the previous metas. And then last one, of course, we're going to give a quick shout out to is going to be the Purple Serpents. This is one that we've seen time and time again. It did have the special anti-Hydra tech main deck, which you really love to see. Of course, this is very similar. I think only like 1 or 2 more cards off from the other purple lists that we've seen from the other events. So not surprised to see it here in top 16. Probably would have made top 8, just, you know, unlucky on one of the rounds, and that's just how it is. But the one thing I got to say, and I don't know if this was an error or not, but what's going on here with only 6 cards registered in the sideboard, right? So, hey, a good 6 cards to have, but you have 4 more slots and probably could use it for, you know, some extra dream bombs and things of that nature. Maybe even a 4th double deadly if you really wanted it. But, you know, a couple more changes we would have liked to have seen here just to round out the sideboard. But ultimately, a very, very staple list from the meta overall, and one that I think that we will continue to see do well in future events. So with that, again, huge shout out to the Italian community for hosting this amazing event, the Nexus guys for casting it. They did a really great job, and overall just some fantastic battles that we got to watch in Battle Spirit Saga. So with that, we got a little bit of a break until, you know, the online events, and then regionals will be kicking off here, you know, shortly after that. So definitely a little bit of a lull period, it feels like, now that we have this first batch of events complete. And of course, a little bit to go until the Evangelion booster set, but at least the summer overall should be looking pretty good for Battle Spirit Saga and some fun events that I hope to get to see some people at. Like, I'll definitely be going to Chicago, which is the one that's announced right now, and I'll try to travel to some other ones that pop up, but I'll be going to Gen Con, whether I qualify or not, just because Gen Con is, you know, obviously one of the biggest tabletop events in the entire world every year. So, like, why wouldn't you go to Gen Con? But, like, I'm so excited for Gen Con this year because I'm sure there's going to be some special announcements that we're going to see. And also, whatever Badai's cooking up, we'll probably hear there as well. So, with that, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.